Hello and welcome to a lesson painting with coffee. Painting with coffee is a very cheap and easily accessible technique you can use at home. All you're going to need is a pot of coffee, a teaspoon, a paintbrush, some warm water. I've got some boiling water because I've got some coffee granules rather than coffee powder. So the hot boiling water is going to make the coffee dissolve a bit easier. You're going to need like a few cups or a palette like mine, and maybe a little plate that you can use to mix your paint on, or your coffee on, should I say. So if you want to pause the video and get those things now, just a reminder, so you need some coffee, teaspoon to mix it with, a paintbrush to paint with, your image that you've drawn, some water to dilute the coffee with, and a couple of cups or a palette if you've got one, with some containers to hold the coffee in. It's going to be quite watery, so you're going to need it quite deep. So go grab those things now. So painting with coffee is a really good technique because, as you can see on my image here, you can get a really sort of monochromatic painting that focuses on varied use of tone. So you can mix your coffee to get a really dark tone, maybe for inside the nose of my skull here, inside the eyes. You can get those medium tones that maybe the light isn't quite sort of directly shining on them, but it's not as dark as the dark tones. And then our highlights, where in most cases I've not even painted the coffee on. So places like on the bridge of the forehead, maybe around by the eye socket, maybe some little highlights down on the teeth, and maybe some of the jaw. So it's a really good technique to use at home and to start learning how to apply those tones to make our images become a bit more three-dimensional, particularly the contrast between the dark tones and the light tones. My eye socket is protruding out on my image because I've got this dark tone on the temple and the highlight running down the jawbone itself. And around here, for example, it's really light because that contrasts the dark tones in the eye. The eye is looks like it's going inwards, whereas the jawbone is coming out. That's what creates that depth, and that's why it's a really good technique to use the coffee to include depth in your work. So if you haven't already seen my video on how to do a grid drawing, I suggest you watch that. So that's the grid drawing I did last video. If you're not confident using the grid drawing method, then I suggest that you get yourself a pencil, colour the back of the image, and then you're going to trace your outline on a piece of plain paper. It's absolutely fine way to do. It's just a technique to help you gauge your composition. So you're going to transfer your outline or your details, etc., etc. I can transfer over if I've got enough pencil on the back there. You can see that. There you go. So make sure you've got your image ready, and now we're going to mix our coffee. I need to keep that. I'll keep my example to one side, and I'm going to start again on this one. So you're going to need to have 3 different values of tone. Like I said, we've got those highlights, which you don't really paint much on. There's mid-tones and there's dark tones. So for my dark tones, I'm going to start with a full teaspoon of coffee. Okay, in that one. For my mid-tones, I'm going to go with maybe half a teaspoon of coffee. And those really light ones, I'm just going to get a tiny bit of coffee, maybe even less than that. Just a tiny bit, just to give us a really light version. And in each one of these pots, I'm going to apply the same amount of hot water. I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of water in each one. So we're keeping that as a constant almost. 1, 2 in that one as well. I want to mix light to dark so I don't transfer any of the coffee from my light one to my dark one. As you can see, it's really watery. And what we're going to do, it's a bit like using watercolours. But it is really, really like using watercolours. We're going to apply different washes to our work, starting from the light tone up to the really dark tone one. Stir, and the last one might be quite thick. Make sure you try and get all of the coffee to dissolve. You might want to use instant coffee. That's the powder version of coffee. That tends to work a bit better. The granules are fine, as long as you use some hot water. Be careful whilst using the hot water. Make sure all the coffee's stirred in, so all that pigment is in with the water. You can see how thick it is on the edge of my teaspoon there. Okay, I'll go with that. Put that to one side, over there. So try and keep this water clean as well, by the way. We're going to use that later on. So keep these tones. This one looks darker than that one. I think that one's just got a bit of froth on top, making it look a bit lighter, but light, medium, dark. So when we are applying our light tones, well, when we're applying our tones of coffee, you need to start from the lightest to the darkest colour. So I'm going to start with my light one here, dip it in, and really look at my image and think, where are the dark, medium and light tones? Well, dark in the eyes, medium ones are maybe just above the brow, and the lighter tones are more in the centre of that skull. So whilst I'm looking at the photograph, I'm applying these washes on one at a time. You can't even see how light that is. I'll zoom in a bit. Make sure my camera stays still. So this is our lightest wash. As you can see, if you put a second wash on, it's going to make it slightly darker. So you can either thin that water out, or thin it out by dragging it out, or have it more concentrated in one area so it goes dark if you wanted to. Really, this is why we're starting with our light tone first. Start with our light tone first, because if we make a mistake, say if I go over this area, I can always make it darker. So what we want to do really with our light one is go everywhere but on those highlights. So everywhere apart from the really light white bits, I suggest. So now I've put the light tones on, I'm now going to move to my medium one. I've only been using this one so far. To move on to my medium tones. So you can take the excess off if you wanted to. And look at where it's sort of slightly starting to get a bit darker. So particularly, so for this area, around here, it's a lot darker up on there. Round by the eye. Now this one, the mid-tone, I'd start to be a bit more careful. When I was doing my light one, my light wash, first of all, I wasn't really being that accurate, because a lot of the light tone doesn't really matter, because I'm actually making it a bit darker in most places now. But I've been a bit more precise with my mid-tones. So last but not least, I'm going to go over our darkest tone now. So the darker one, it's actually really thick as well. See now the froth's gone off it, it's gone really dark, hasn't it? The water's actually thicker. You're just going to go in, don't use too much. Take the excess off on the edge. That's why I said to get a plate. So what I've been doing is using this lip on my palette and taking off the excess on mine. So you squeeze it out, but that paint comes off. So the dark bits start with the top and move our way down, I suppose. So in around by the eye here. Put a bit more up in there. I'm pretty happy with that. So what I want to do, let this dry and work into it with some biro pen afterwards, make some bits stand out a bit more. Well, thank you for watching.